Welcome to Composer's Corner. In this episode, I catch up with Christopher Willis on his recent work that includes the incredible music for Demon 79 from the TV series Black Mirror, as well as his lyrical score for the feature animated film LAMYA'S POEM. Willis is an Emmy Award-winning composer, arranger, songwriter, and pianist whose diverse career spans film and television soundtracks, interactive media, popular music, and concert works.
Just as a little background, I didn't know anything about Black Mirror. Friends of mine talked about it. They said it was great. When Michael Carlson on Facebook said, saw the Demon 79 episode scored by Christopher Willis. And they said, he's channeling all the mid-20th century modernist type stuff. Like, I have to see that. And I wasn't disappointed. Did the director specifically have that in mind, or did you have to was that your interpretation of the subject matter and then you convinced him?
It was mostly the former. All credit to the director Toby Haynes and to Charlie Brooker and the producers and writers. It's such a test for them, I think, making a Black Mirror because each one is its own thing. It's an anthology series. So the money and the time available to completely create a world are very finite, so it could so easily end up looking very cheap and bad. And the fact that it ended up, as you say, it feels incredibly cinematic and incredibly carefully thought through. That's really a testament, to all of them, but certainly to Toby, who is able to approach something so cinematically and is not afraid of the fact that they probably only get a fraction of the time in a given setting to shoot a scene that they would have on a movie, and I imagine the prop budget and every aspect of the budget is quite limited. But yeah, he does everything he needs to with pacing and lighting and so also with the music. There was, when I came on board, there was already a very clear idea of what they were thinking about. They were, of course, that you can tell from the episode that they're interested in sort of mid-century or kind of 60s, 70s aesthetics and the language of horror movies and even of concert music from that period. There were lots of discussions about The Shining, which we all admired very much. So that's one jumping off point. As with any of these things, it could have gone, it could still have gone in a few directions, and you can probably tell my aesthetic as gleaned from other things. I definitely sort of pushed for it to do a certain thing. I thought it would be very interesting and strange and unusual if we really went for that target. Something that I was saying to them is that, of course, a lot of those aleatoric sounds evolved from being these concert music techniques into being the standard tricks of horror movies. But in the process, a lot of them were made much more pragmatic and simpler. So that in a piece of Ligeti or a piece of Penderecki, the score fans out into thousands of staves, and everyone's notation is incredibly precise. The fourth basses are in quintuplets, but the third basses are in triplets, and that language evolved into something that a lot of us who work in films know about now, which is sort of you have menus, you have your symphobia, and you have your risers and all that kind of thing, and in order to try and get back to that, to strip away the pragmatism, I sort of wanted to make it difficult for myself, and go back and try and write with a lot of effort, because I think the sound is not exactly the same and the things that happen are not exactly the same if they've been obsessed over in that very modernist way. I mean, those old Ligeti pieces, he makes everything look kind of like it's a fugue, even though you can't hear a damn thing. They're very concerned that it should look scary and sort of it should feel like it's part of this very intellectual tradition of Webern and other things.
I was re-listening to our interview and you were talking about academia, and I know that you were sort of had mixed feelings about some of that because you came up at the time, like myself, where if you were studying music, and composition, you were pushed to write in that kind of realm, very highly cerebral and not very tonal. it seemed like as once you get past that, is that like a reverse rebel? Like when you're younger, you rebel against the academia and you want to write tonal music, and then as you get older, you see how it sits in sort of the grand scheme of the Western music development.
Oh man, that's very good. That's a good question. It's a very searching question. I haven't quite resolved that myself, but I totally agree. It's so funny. I mean, I'm just going to rehash what you said first, but yes, all the way through school, I felt funneled into this kind of late modernist mindset that I found very stifling, because I just felt that my education wasn't finished. I could barely write a bar chorale type texture, and we were moving on to, finding my voice and cutting up pieces of paper with little bits of music on them and hanging them from the ceiling and stripping naked and screaming in the middle of concerts and all that. But it's so funny. Ever since I'm thinking about this out loud because I really have trouble piecing it together myself. Ever since I got off the plane in LA, 15 years ago, whatever, I seem to have been drawn. I remember going back and listening, because I wasn't even a big expert in film music, and I remember going, starting to really explore film music and realizing how drawn I was to the stuff that was tonally most difficult. I had a whole sort of reawakening of discovering John Williams and Star Wars and his whole output, and realizing that it was way more atonal than I'd realized. And then you go to Goldsmith, and you go to Planet of the Apes, and you go to all these horror scores as well. And yeah, the weird thing is I'm finding myself drawn back into that flavor that as a teenager I was so bothered by. But there's something about approaching it historically and understanding where it came from that helps. Now I know the 20th century so much better than I did before, and I kind of understand how exciting and rebellious, for want of a better word, it all was in the 50s and 60s when also some of it's good and some of it's bad. The way that it was taught to me in the 80s and 90s was very sort of dogmatic. There was hardly even a place for saying that any of it was bad. And a lot of the stuff that was being shoved at me was sort of by British composers that no one's listened to again since then. And I remember every time they came on the radio, the announcer would have to give a little hand to how amazing this piece was before you heard it. And it always felt very sort of forced and kind of like, you don't do that with every other piece of music. Why are you telling me how amazing this is? So it was very sort of, it's a very, very different experience coming back to it all. And coming back to the best stuff, the Ligeti, the stuff that's so tasty, that works so well without actually needing tonality. But I think maybe you and I feel very similarly about this. Yeah. Well, one obvious answer in as to how you can not like that music at one stage of life and then come back to it is, of course, it's very different if it's found a home on film. In some ways, I wonder if that's too easy, because now I even can understand how exciting it must have been to go to a concert of Ligeti. But I do think that's part of the answer. It's how I feel to some extent about the Second Viennese School, and the evolution to what Scott Bradley and to some extent Carl Stalling did with it. A lot of that Looney Tunes and MGM stuff is so spiky and does seem to be very heavily influenced by Schoenberg and by that sort of very spiky modernism. And by and large, I think I actually, I definitely listen to it more when I'm watching cartoons than I do seeking it out in the original Viennese version in concerts. So I think it's a bit blasphemous to say, but I almost feel like it finally found a home when the cartoon composers adapted it. With the mid-century, with the Ligeti and stuff finding a home in horror, I would still go to a concert of the original. But again, it did sort of help, I think, that stuff getting borrowed by Hollywood.
Yeah, the needle dropping on The Exorcist and The Shining in particular, I think worked better. And same with Demon 79. They were clearly going for almost a documentary feel. It didn't feel heavily dramatized. Even the music that you supplied, the underscore, is very atmospheric. I especially did like, though, the part where she finds the talisman and there's kind of that piano violin. I don't know if you were there was any kind of system that you used to, or it was free kind of atonality or whatnot, or you were rocking the Fibonacci sequence like Bartók.
There wasn't really a system, but there's a lot of, like, this is going to sound too pat, but if there's a bit that sounds wrong, you work instinctively something, and then if there's a bit that sounds wrong, you start looking at the pictures and wondering if there's one that you've missed, or if there's some pattern that your brain is wanting. But yes, that bit is a little sort of earlier in inspiration than a lot of the rest. It's quite Bartók-y with the glisses. It was nice to have a chance to do a gentler, sort of subtly twisted, rather than this really manic stuff that a lot of the rest of it is.
What kind of group did you have for that? And was that local, or was that like a remote type of recording?
Well, so this is very interesting. So both the orchestra and the choir in Demon 79 were the result of a bit of an experiment. For a lot of experiments over the years on TV shows, on Mickey Mouse and things like that. When time and money are limited, but you really want it to sound a certain way. So the orchestra, I did a thing. This is opening the opening the lid on secret techniques. I had always wondered if this might be possible, and I think it might only be possible if the music is atonal. I really, really didn't want to use samples, because I just, you've just felt that you would feel the realness. But it was going to be very, very tough to get an orchestra of the size that I wanted. And of course, we could have, as you mentioned, we could have perhaps phoned into somewhere that's cheaper. But I was worried about the techniques and the specificity of the music and the language gap that we'd have. If I'm on Zoom talking in English, and then someone translates it to German, and then the conductor translates it to Hungarian. So we did it in the English speaking world, but we did it with basically a third of an orchestra. All of the sections that would have three things, we had one of them. In fact, we had one of almost everything except for the strings, and then we had a small string section. And literally each cue was written with 3 or 4 passes. Now, the trouble with this, if you were actually writing nice music that was tonal, is that I think each pass would be intolerably weird, and it'd be very hard to know for sure if your tuning was any good. I mean, you could do it. Maybe one day I will try it, but I think it would be very unsettling. Whereas if it's all deliberate, if it's all atonal and it's all clusters, then I think you can tolerate. It still doesn't sound. It would sound much more exciting if it was everyone together. But you can get past 1 done and convince yourself that you probably nailed it, and then go back and do past 2. The choir is even fewer people, but over the years we've got a lot of techniques on other things I've done, with choir, with pitching the having the singers sing it lots of times at different pitches. You sing it above and then pitch them down, and have them sing it below and pitch them up. And then my mixer, Satoshi Noguchi, shout out to Satoshi, is a genius, and we've been working for many years on these kinds of problems.
I've told everybody, if there's, that's the best 7 minutes you're going to hear in the next little while.
Oh man, that's really nice. No, I'm really glad to. But I wasn't sure with so little of it. I wasn't sure. I mean, and I haven't talked that much to people about it. So you're the perfect person to chat to about it, because I can tell you were picking up everything that I was throwing down, or whatever the expression is. It definitely gave me a newfound appreciation for particularly Penderecki. There's that trick whereby you tell each person to do a given thing. You give them a sort of module of stuff to do, and then the aggregate effect is totally surprising. Is crazy. Each person is straining to do this particular sequence of bizarre actions. I don't know how he got there. Perhaps by workshopping a whole bunch. He had a string orchestra at his disposal, and I mean, I don't think in a million years I would have figured a lot of those things out. So there's a lot of debt to him in there, with me kind of using pretty similar types of tricks to the ones that you find in Penderecki, and how you hear them and they sound perfectly horrific and evocative, and then you see what it is that each person's doing, and it's crazy the effect that you get. So yeah, there's a lot of me learning from Penderecki in those 7 minutes, especially in the cues in the middle.
Anyhow, I want to get on to LAMYA'S poem. I guess you talked about that as we were concluding our last interview, so you were just heading into that project.
I think it must have been stop-start. If it was early 2020, then I probably didn't get that much done right away. I was probably, I would have got one cut and then been not sure whether I should start. And then it's often tricky, with an animated film. You're trying to decide, should I launch in, even though I've got what I'm looking at is animatics and unfinished, or should I wait and give, and then I'll have less. I'll have what I'm working with is more vivid, but I'll have less time. Yes, that's crazy. And of course now here we are in 2023. So they were laboring to switch over to finishing the whole thing remotely, which they were able to do. And I was writing a lot of it over the summer and then in the fall. And the whole COVID situation was such a roller coaster. There was a feeling in late-ish 2020, around Thanksgiving 2020, everyone thought that it was almost done and that LA was opening up. And I was making plans to record the strings all together in one room. And then by sometime in the fall, by the time I actually finished the score, that was completely off the table again. So actually the strings that you hear are tracked up in the most laborious way. Credit to the musicians who were able to tune with each other. You know, you start from the bottom, and that generally helps, so that the viola is tuning to the cello and the violin is tuning to the violas and cellos. But it was one of a few projects where I definitely bonded with the people I was working with, but without meeting them in person. And that's so strange. So the director of this, Alex Kronemer, and a whole splurge of Mickey Mouse's had to be done remotely, and endless jazz big band had to be recorded remotely, which is so depressing. And then Cat Burglar, I wrote Cat Burglar and worked with the filmmakers on Cat Burglar completely remotely. Although mercifully we recorded that the following summer, and by then London was open and we were able to record that in person, and I'm so happy we were.
One thing that really strikes me about the score is how it juggles or contrasts this lyrical humanity with this very dissonant inhumanity. Obviously, the subject matter very much dictating that. I was just wondering if you can talk a bit more about how you balance those two elements from the score.
Yeah, well, it's funny actually. When I first started talking to them about the score, I think we had images of it being sort of a big kind of fantasy score, being all orchestra, and the light and shade being the kind of light and shade that you'd imagine in a Mulan or I don't know, a Disney movie. And then as it evolved, we were just finding that wasn't what we were drawn to. That wasn't working. And as you say, the contrast between the sort of the dreams and the hopes and the civility and the humanity on the one hand, and the kind of evil, this sort of the guns and the these kind of beasts in the dream world, and the kind of tanks and armies in the real world. That got darker and darker, and it felt okay. I wasn't sure at first if it would, but yeah. So there's this very airy string texture with sort of harp being these sort of kind of representing fireflies and things. There are synths, and there are kind of even more than synths. There are just certain reverbs and certain delays that make the organic stuff sound a little bit sort of otherworldly. But then when the evil things come in, it's very, very gruesome sounding. And it's kind of music that I've written here and there for many years, especially when I used to work in other composers' studios, because I worked on some very sort of normal mainstream scores back then. But in my own stuff that's been released, I haven't really done that kind of thing. I haven't showcased that kind of thing before. So it's kind of nice for me. I mean, and I really admire the people who do that really well. I think Ludwig Göransson is great. I'm often poring over his soundscapes because I think he's just so good at manipulating a sound like that. So yeah, it was fun for me to do the evil bits, the attacks and the chases and the sort of air raids and stuff in this very, very kind of gritty, nasty way.
Yeah, there seems like there's some, I don't know if there's granular synthesis that you used, and there's this deep glide glissandi kind of thing, almost akin to what if you would use in double basses. So I can still hear the orchestral sensibilities, but definitely adapted to the orchestration of the synths. And I think I think I heard a distortion, not a guitar maybe, or something. It's really quite a nice, bouquet of various tones and textures when even though there's this very adamant element to it, very throbbing. You could almost say it's like an updated Rite of Spring. It's very primal, right? It's got that really primal,
right,
edgy, visceral wallop to it. It's kind of scary too. I listened to Demon 79 today again. Then I listened right after to Lamya's Poem again, and I actually could see the symmetry there. There is some symmetry between the war stuff or the monster stuff in terms of just the texture and the approach.
Yes, that's interesting actually. Yeah, those wails, the sort of screams are quite similar actually between I hadn't thought of that. I mean, the whole sound also even of the string stuff is on the simpler end of what I would normally do. I was trying to sort of exist in this relatively kind of film vernacular way. I think it's still in it. There's an awful lot of suspensions and stuff, so it still ended up being a bit Chris Willis-y. But yeah, I was definitely in territory that's quite different from a lot of what I've been doing. And someone the other day asked me about the fact that it doesn't really modulate, which is so funny because I've been so rude in the past about other people's scores that do that. And I still haven't quite resolved that. Either I'm completely wrong and that scores that don't modulate are fine, or I have some excuse that I haven't yet been able to verbalize or think of. I mean, it seemed right in this score for it not to move that much tonally. I think because of the big contrast that you were talking about, because you've got the very organic stuff and you've got this very evil stuff. So at least if we find our way back to E minor, then 20 minutes into the film, then our ear can sort of hear the continuity with other cues from way earlier. And, certain pitches, I started realizing I was sort of finding my way to that B over and over in the movie felt very kind of useful, amid all of the weirdness of the synths to find my way there. So, yeah, I haven't quite resolved that in my mind. I mean, I used to always think it was absurd to do that the film should evolve and you should know if you're 3/4 of the way through the film, you should feel it deeply in the music, in the harmonic language. But now I'm all at sea. I don't know what I think about that.
It does feel like that, though, as one progresses through, at least as I found, as I was progressing through the tracks. There's the Fireflies, which has the sort of one of the key ideas. But I did find that by the time I got to the Parable of the Serpent, I felt like it was moving dramatically and evolving and developing. To me, it's very meditative almost, but not meditative in a static way. I love the fact that you use a lot of space between the phrases. It's something that we don't hear a lot anymore. It's something you'd have to go all the way back to something like Francis Ford Coppola's or Black Stallion, where there was a lot of space between, and the Black Stallion had also sort of Arabic solo flute things with, and just let the gestures kind of resonate. It's nice to hear that.
Yeah, I was. Thank you. I was surprised actually at where we ended up with that. But we were finding we wanted the music to be in quite a lot. So there's even more music in the film than there is in the soundtrack. And being in so much, want to get annoying, you know. So I have to sort of develop this language of being in a rather vague ambient sort of way, with the odd gesture and then lots of reverb on it, and then kind of sitting back, and then maybe a couple of violin notes, and again sitting back. Yeah, almost like certain traditions of theatre or shadow puppetry or something, you know, where they have music all the time, but it's all improvised, and so sometimes it gets very, very slow and very sort of vague. But it was it was nice to hit a groove and eventually start feeling that instinctively.
Well, the other thing that I found is you're often shifting between the full ensemble, then you've got the solo chairs of the principals playing almost in a quartet. So you're getting a lot of timbral sort of variation, because you're going from a larger group, and it was still a chamber group, but it still feels bigger when everybody's playing versus your principals or just, you know,
I love doing that. I feel like I still haven't finished. I'm going to probably keep doing that. I did that a whole bunch in David Copperfield and really enjoyed doing that. Even in the middle of a kind of a busy action, I hesitate to say action cue because David Copperfield isn't like an action movie, but to come to the solo strings for a bit and then to go back feels very just very, very appealing to me. Some of those players are so blisteringly good.
Yeah, what group did you use for Copperfield? I can't remember but they're in London, right?
Yeah, I had a great experience on that because it was Aurora Orchestra, who are a pre-existing orchestra, who don't do movies all the time, although they do some. And I know that some of the founding members and Nicholas Collin, the conductor, I've known them for years and years and years. So I sort of had the idea, God, 20 years ago, that it would be super cool to well, back then I thought it would be super cool to ever work on a movie. But assuming that happened, it would be super cool to come back to London and to do a score with them. And that is, also, in the end, after many years, we did do that. And I just was so impressed with how I thought they were very good at the Englishness somehow, and they were just so homogenous. I had a similar. I did an album, this Eva Cassidy album. I don't know if you know about it actually, but with the LSO. And again, I was nothing against. I've never had I've had great experiences with orchestras in Hollywood and with film orchestras, but I do think that I've been very struck by the orchestras that I've worked with recently who know each other and work together all the time. It's beautiful just hearing them do the simplest things, because they all kind of agree about how a crescendo should sound. I could imagine working with groups in the future who are established groups, because it is so satisfying. Sometimes you get the same effect anyway, because you work with the same people year after year. I would say the Mickey Mouse sessions ended up a bit like that, because I worked with almost the same big band with variations for many years, and they knew each other incredibly well. And so to that extent, it was almost the same effect there, where the way that they swing and the way that they tune is again very, very, very kind of homogenous.
I've heard your SoundCloud page with all of the different Mickey Mouse stuff. I mean, the technique alone, not even counting the inspiration or the talent, it's crazy to be asked to do all these types of genres and execute it so well. And I'm sure the timeline is very, very, very quick on those.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you. Yeah, I sometimes felt like the directors of Mickey Mouse were trying to kill me. But I'm now great friends with several of them, and what an experience. It's just sort of this. It's been this unique splurge of time making those cartoons together, and as you say, yeah, doing a Bollywood one, and then doing a one, an Amsterdam one, and then and actually just learning from the musical tastes of all of the other people. Paul Rudish, the showrunner, has such great and wild musical tastes. He had always wanted to do a disco one because he loves disco, and he loves Xanadu, and he has certain sort of but I know that part of his motivation in wanting to do a disco one was to actually be like, okay, now we force Willis to spend a month obsessing over disco and see if he can come up with anything. What is great experience.
Before we conclude, what's on the future for you? And now that you've gotten past a couple of really incredible projects in 2023,
I'm working on another Eva Cassidy album. Actually, we already have more tracks than we were able to fit on that album. So we had some already done by the time that one came out. But I've been working on some more of those. Some of them lean more in the jazz direction because she loved to do jazz standards as well as these. She did the slower ones, which then we've extrapolated into these kind of lush, stringy versions. But she also did a lot of jazz standards, and then you start going down a kind of Nelson Riddle rabbit hole. So that's very cool. I'm very excited about that. I'm about to start something new with Disney, although I probably better not say too much about it. That's all very exciting. And I've got a couple of movies in the works. In terms of genre, we're all over the map. I'm working on a dramedy right now, although the score might end up being quite unconventional, so that could be stranger than one would expect from if I were to tell you the pitch. And I did a movie with Bill Burr. Bill Burr is his first movie as director. I absolutely loved working with him. He's absolutely brilliant, and the film is hilarious. So I did a comedy with him with a kind of pretty rock and roll kind of score, which is coming out in the fall. So quite a lot of different things. SCHMIGADOON has been such a joy, and I know that they are striking quite rightly. So season 3 is in limbo, but season 3 will happen, I'm sure. And the little things I've heard about what it's going to be are so exciting. So I'm very, very, very excited about that. I think I'm going to get another opportunity to sort of flex some weird muscles on there.
Oh, it's great.
Based on what they said they're going to do.
Well, thank you very much, Christopher, for your time. I really appreciate it. I hopefully you get some sleep too. I know that that's going to be a tall order in the next few months / years.
Yeah, he's been a good boy so far. He's been letting us. He's fussy, but we're talking about a newborn. Nolan. He's been very good so far. But yeah, it's going to be wild.